3. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's September 27th Superintendent's Budget Advisory Task Force. Welcome to a new school year. Even though many of us have been well into the school year, this is our first Superintendent's Budget Advisory Task Force of the new year. And like many things as we start the new year, I'd like to begin with some introductions because we have some new members joining us this afternoon for our meeting. And I want to make sure that we're all aware of who's who on our call, and then we'll move into our agenda. So because we're on Zoom, everybody's screen is going to look a little bit different. So what I will do is introduce myself. I'll move to Patty, and then I'll start calling on people to give a brief introduction. If you can just give us your name and your role with the district, and then we'll complete our introductions that way. My name is CJ Kamick, Superintendent for Fremont Unified. Patty? Patty, I think you're on mute.
My apologies. Hello, Patty Sandoval, support to the Board of Trustees and Superintendent Kamick.
Thank you, Patty. Trustee Campbell?
Desiree Campbell, board member.
Thank you. Trustee Jones?
Hello, Diane Jones, board member, and I'm going to apologize. We've got work going on in the house today, so I'm going to stay muted. And if I chime in for something and you hear noise, that's why.
Thank you, Trustee Jones. And we'll move to Matt.
Matt Duscott, I'm president of SEIU.
Thank you, Matt. Lucas?
Lucas Bogle, Chief Technology Officer.
Thank you. Ann?
Ann Dameron, I am a school secretary at Olivera, and I'm representing the Classified School Employees Association.
Thank you. Susan?
Sorry, I was muted. Good afternoon. My name is Susan Condor Hernandez, and I'm representing FUDTA. Thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you for being here. Julia?
Hi, my name is Julia. I'm the budget analyst. It's the BAA department, budget and audit and attendance.
Thank you very much, Julia. And Sakat?
Hi, I'm Saikat Paul. I am representing the parents of FUSD.
Thank you very much for joining us. I did see Nancy.
Yes, Nancy Pfeiffer, Associate Superintendent for the school district.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And as we were doing that, I had a few adjustments on the screen, so I had to go back and track back to some people. We did see Rais Abbasi. I think he fell off the call. Maybe he'll jump back on in a moment, hopefully. And if you see the name Luis Zamora on our screen, for those of you who aren't familiar, Luis Zamora is assisting us and responsible for helping us stream this meeting live to our website. So that being said, we'll begin moving through our introductions. And Ms. Sandoval, if you could, we will do a brief review of the meeting norms. Are you able to pull those up and screen share those for everyone to see, please? Thank you.
Yes, I can. One moment, please.
And as Ms. Sandoval is doing that, for those of you who are new to our group, you will note that these are a little bit revised if you followed along with prior years. We did a review when I first started last fall and didn't change them dramatically, but did a little bit of work to try and streamline the norms and the purpose and the focus areas.
Can you all see that?
We are seeing a screen of recent Google Drive, Ms. Sandoval.
Oh, so wrong screen. Sorry, I work off two screens. There you go. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you so much. So just to review the meeting norms, they're closer to the bottom. Our meeting norms are to start and stop on time. As you might imagine, focus on the problem and not the person. Use of discretion. One person can speak at a time. Assume all have the best intentions. Agenda is created by representatives of this task force with input from other groups, and we'll get to that at the end of our meeting today. We ask that everybody, as a norm, keeps an open mind, pre-reads any of the circulated information before the meeting, and that everyone at the table are equals, that we respect other suggestions or points of view, understand and think through with no emotion, and as a trustee for our trustees, listen, take a step back, assess current processes, and hear new ideas generated from the group. As we go back to the purpose and the goals, you can see at the top of the page, if you're still bringing it back forward there, Patty, thank you. The goals are to develop an understanding of the district's budget and financial issues. And this is important here when we look at recommending to the Board of Education through the superintendent ideas related to reducing expenditures or increasing revenues towards a more balanced and focused budget, contribute to improved communication to enhance understanding of the district's budget and financial condition, contribute to and support a transparent and collaborative budget process. The focus areas, I will lead you to read to yourself. You've probably heard enough of my voice by now. Any questions from the group or feedback from the group on the meeting norms, purpose and goals before we move forward into our discussion and presentation this afternoon? And please feel free to use the raise your hand feature or raise it on the screen, and I'm going to keep looking for everybody there. Trustee Jones?
Hi, yeah, I just had a question about the makeup of the task force. I know in prior years, we had a lot more parent representation, and I'm not sure we have anybody here from FSMA. And I know this is your task force, CJ, so I'm just wanting to make sure that this is representative of what you want on the task force, and if we need to take any actions to recruit any folks. I want to be supportive of that.
Thanks, Trustee Jones. That's a great question. And we do not have all of our participant spots filled out, so we are continuing to seek some additional representatives, both from FSMA and from the parent perspective. We have 3 slots for parent representatives. And for anybody else who's on the call today, if you have the agenda, you can see where we have the participants listed on the bottom of the page where we have the norms and the goals. So we do have some additional spots that we would love to see filled, and we're going to continue to work on that recruiting process. But I don't think any specific action is needed today from the group. But if you have a parent who you think might be interested, that'd be a great place to reach out. If you have a colleague that you think might be interested, we have an additional spot for SEIU representative, and we'll go back and keep looking at this as well. We also have 2 spots for business civic community representatives as well. So we're going to continue to keep trying to build out our full team so that we can have an enriched discussion around these topics. Any other questions or comments or feedback on the meeting norms, purpose, and goals? Okay, seeing none. What we're going to do is move forward with a review of the first interim, unaudited actuals and budget priorities. So the first interim, to be clear, is not completed. What we're going to be going over is a presentation by the Associate Superintendent that talks about where Fremont Unified School District came out in the unaudited actuals. And then we're going to do a brief overview of the budgeting process. And I acknowledge up front that for some of you, that cycle will be very familiar and it may sound familiar. But we want to do a little bit of norming in the beginning of the year as we engage in these discussions, since we have some new representatives to the group. As we do that, I'll point out that this really focuses under what we just reviewed for our focus areas is a deeper understanding of budget deficit and surplus, and also making sure that we are focused on where our money is. So the unaudited actuals is a very important part of the year for us. because it sets the foundation of where we start the year financially. So with that, I'll turn it over to Associate Superintendent Pfeiffer and welcome her to her first Superintendent's Budget Advisory Task Force since joining us this summer. Nancy?
Thank you, Superintendent Kamick. I'm more than happy to be here. It's an honor to be with Fremont Unified School District, and thank you for the opportunity to share information about the district's finances. Ms. Sandoval is going to help me with projecting the PowerPoint presentation. So if you can help me with that, Patty, we will start with the presentation. So what we're going to go over today is on slide number 2. Slide number 2. There we go. So this is really in a very short PowerPoint presentation, a high-level overview of how the budget development process works. And what we're going to start with is with a review of our unaudited actuals and actual summary, what the first interim means to the district, what happens when after the first interim when the governor introduces the state budget, how does that impact the budget development for our district?
Hey, Nancy, I apologize for interrupting you. Ms. Sandoval, I'm not sure if you're able to adjust it. I think because you're working off 2 screens, our panel and our audience is seeing 2 slides at once.
Oh, okay. I was hoping that somebody would say that. So hang on a second. I'm on the other screen then. Hold on.
There you go. Oh, I thought it was just me seeing double.
Hold on. It's not. Hold on a second, please. Sorry. You're still seeing 2 screens, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Slideshow. I do from the beginning. It goes to my other screen.
Patty, I believe it's the presenter view option. So if you go back out, and you see on the far right there on the slideshow, use presenter view. If you uncheck that, I believe that will go away.
Uh-oh.
You can close out of that with the X
Okay.
and then cancel. And then uncheck, oh, it was right in the middle of the screen there. Sorry, go back. Right there, uncheck that box.
Okay.
And then go ahead and do a quick save.
It's still bringing it to the right side, which I can't move.
We're seeing the full, we're seeing the presentation.
You're seeing it fully?
Yes.
No, we're seeing the outline still in the window.
Oh, okay.
Oh, my apologies. It worked. I literally tested it right before coming on board. So let's see. That's not popping up. I can't.
Can you use that little button at the bottom on the right? That all the way down at the bottom on the right, there's a little presenter button. It's sort of next to, yeah, that one. See if that one works.
It's actually in full presentation mode, but it's because I have 2 screens. It's picking up my left instead of my right. Yes. It is. You're not seeing it at all? It's still the left side? Okay, hang on a second. My apologies. That up.
Patty, as you're working on that, would it be easier to use the PDF version from the agenda?
That might work best. Thank you. Let's see. Share. Yes, y'all can see that. How's that? Is that better? Yes, okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we're gonna, I have a few slides to share with you regarding the unaudited actuals. We'll talk about first interim and the governor's introduction of the state budget, the budget development calendar, when we begin the budget development process, the importance of second interim, May revise, and having the opportunity to share with the board assumptions that are being used before we develop the complete budget, and then the process of a public hearing and budget adoption. Next screen. So the most important component of the unaudited actuals is that it provides actual information. So when we take the first interim, second interim, estimated actuals, and budget, we're using assumptions. We're using assumptions that we collect from different, from the state, from our own information, enrollment, staffing, and so on and so forth. But the unaudited actuals gives us actual information and not assumptions. This is how we actually ended the year. It gives us how much we spent, how much funding we received, and it provides the most important component, which is the ending fund balance. It tells us how much money we were left after the year was over in all of the districts and all of the funds we have in the district. The ending fund balance replaces our estimated beginning fund balance for the 21-22 fiscal year, and there's a typo there. And it provides the solid foundation for the district's financials. So we know for sure how much money we have in the bank and how much money we have in each of the funds that the district has. And the district has good news as far as the unaudited actuals are concerned. The district ended its year with an additional $17.1 million from our estimated actuals in unrestricted revenue. Next slide, please. It ended the year with an additional $15.4 million in restricted revenue. Next slide, please, for a total of an additional $32.4 million. So the question you may be asking yourself is how is it that we ended with a lot more funding than what we anticipated? And most of it has to do with the fact that last fiscal year, the district did not reopen schools and not all services were provided. Some services were provided, but not all services were provided. It's reflected both on the unrestricted side and on the restricted side, where some of the additional federal and state funding was not spent last year and is now becoming part of our beginning fund balance for this year. So of the $48 million on unrestricted fund balance that we have, $32.9 million is now the district's reserve of 8.5%. We also have a set aside of $14.1 million, and that's for a part of the estimated decline in enrollment and revenue that the district is going to receive. And most of the rest of the funding is really restricted money that we can't, not restricted, but money that's been set aside for either maintenance projects, for Medi-Cal administrative allocations for the sites, mandated cost allocations, SEI professional growth. So we have money left over on the unrestricted side, but it's still a set aside for these different needs that the district has. Next slide. On the restricted side, you'll see that $19.6 million was not spent last year, and it's all under ELOG. There's also an additional $2.1 million that's part of ELOG for paraprofessionals. And donations and fundraising for the schools is $5.8 million. So that's a very large amount of what we have in the restricted fund balance that has strings attached to it and cannot be spent, but in the areas that have been shared with you. Next slide, please. The concern we have at the time that we closed the books is that we do have a declining enrollment of about 1,382 students this fiscal year. And although we're being held harmless this fiscal year, it is going to have an impact for us in 22-23. So when we looked at the combined impact for the next 4 years, we're looking at a potential loss in revenue about $25 million. The other thing that we have to look at and worry about is our parcel tax expiration. We've attempted to pass a parcel tax. We were not successful. This is an existing parcel tax that's going to expire. So we need to look at potentially extending this parcel tax, or we can be looking at an additional loss in revenue. That's what I have for the unaudited actuals. And before I move forward, is there any questions from the group that they want me to answer before we move on to the first interim report and its role? Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
I'm sorry, Nancy, I was trying to raise my hand. I was wondering, when are we due to get the next demographic report update? Is that in December or?
No, we are, as soon as the CBETS, which occurs in October, and the entire state of California takes a snapshot of everyone's enrollment. That's the information we're waiting for, and the demographers waiting for, to be able to start their projections for the district's enrollment. Now, we've been working with the demographer already. They've been asking for a lot of information, which we've shared. So when we have those numbers in October, the beginning of October, we're ready for them to start working on developing those projections for our student enrollment.
Okay, so just the numbers that we're seeing right now for projected enrollment decline, are those current numbers, or are those from the prior demographic report?
Prior demographic report.
Okay, so we may see, because the prior demographic report was given to us, I believe, before the pandemic, or wasn't really accounting for the pandemic in any case. So we may see numbers that are significantly different from these in the next projection. Is that?
That is absolutely correct. We didn't have any other information that had been developed by either the demographer or even in-house. So the most concise data that we had to use was the data from the last demographer that prepared these numbers. Our hopes is that the new demographer, now that they have the information on the impact on the pandemic, will be able to give us more numbers. My concern is that the numbers we're using now are low. We're declining enrollment, almost 1,400 students in this fiscal year, and to only decline by 278 seems way too conservative. But that's all the information we had that we can refer the public back to. It was a demographer report.
Nancy, if I may, we have one more question from the psychot, but before we get there, just for some context for our panel members this afternoon, we've talked about this in a few of our recent board meetings, but Fremont Unified is about 4% below our projected enrollment. So each year, Patty, looks like we lost the screen. Thank you. Each year we project our enrollment and base our budget on that. We're about 4% below that projection. In conversation with other districts throughout Alameda County, those other districts, except for 1 or 2 of those districts, are also anywhere from 3 to 6% below their projected enrollment. So that doesn't give us any comfort in the sense that the financial impact is lessened, but it does give us some context that other districts are experiencing the same enrollment trend related to the pandemic and COVID-19. So we'll have to see, I think our demographers will be a great source of information to see how that carries forward across the Bay Area or the state. Next question was from Sakat.
Thanks. So just one question on this approximate 1,400 drop in enrollment. Do we know if there is a analysis of the reasons behind the drop? Is it people moving out of the Bay Area, out of the district, or is it, kids moving into private schools? Is there any color around this number?
We haven't done the full analysis of that yet. We can pull some of that information. So we don't always get an exit survey, for example, from our families. What we are able to track in our student information system is a little bit of information about where the student goes, because we are obligated to track, for example, if a student has transferred to another public school and we have that information, then we track that within our system. So some of that information we're able to pull out, but we won't necessarily know exactly the reason why. It could be because they're moving. It could be economic. It could be maybe someone has decided to do homeschooling for this year. Maybe someone has elected to look at a private school for the year or for a more permanent measure. And I think that's where we'll be looking for more information in the future. Some of that we can draw out, and our staff is going to be working on that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Next slide. The first interim report is what we're really working on now. The first interim report covers the first 4 months of the district's budget. However, we have more information about our staffing for vacant positions and existing positions. So we will know if our budget is the assumptions we used are accurate as it pertains to staffing, as it pertains to revenue, as it pertains to expenditures. This period is also a period of time when we're working on the first interim to work with our departments. It allows for a zero-based budgeting process to take place so that we can review with our district leadership. We estimated this to be your budget now that we have started the year, and those meetings are taking place as we speak. I meet with each of the directors in each of the departments that have an unrestricted general fund balance or general fund budget to ask them, did we allocate the correct dollar amounts for your program? Are you in need of additional resources, or do we have an opportunity to adjust your budget downward? We look at staffing and if they have any vacancies. Are these vacancies still a need? Can we adjust these vacancies? So our first interim is going to be critical for us because it's going to allow us to reevaluate the assumptions we made back in June when we adopted the budget. How close are we to these assumptions? So now we have the unaudited actuals that gives us the foundation. Now we have time to review the first interim report and what does it look like, and bring that information to the board, because the first interim report is critical for us when we establish or when we develop our multi-year projections. So there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes right now, so that by October 31st, we have our budget as close to true expenditures as possible and as close to true revenues as possible. So that's what's happening as we prepare for first interim. Next slide, please. So the first interim covers, as I said, the first 4 months. So it goes from July 1st to October. And we bring the first interim to the board in December. Shortly after we bring the first interim to the board, the governor, usually January 10, introduces the 22-23 state budget for next year. So this is important. This is an important timeline, or it's an important development for the budget development process, because the governor then gives us information as far as what to expect in our revenues, if there's going to be any reductions in revenue, if there's going to be any programs that he's mandating that we're going to have to provide services for. That also provides information on COLAs, cost of living adjustments. Will there be any cuts? Are the COLAs going to be funded? There's a lot of information that comes from the governor introducing the state budget. And once this occurs, this then gives us the information that we need to start working on our budget for next fiscal year. Next slide. So the committee should be familiar with the budget development calendar. This budget development calendar is approved by the board, and it provides the timeline, actions, and persons responsible for the actions listed in the calendar. And it also incorporates the participation of the Budget Advisory Task Force in the monthly activities that are taking place. So every month there's something related to budgets. This is outlined in the budget development calendar. So this will go to the board in January as well. It'll be shared with this committee, and then we can look at if there's any need for adjustments on that calendar. But it gives us the timeline, and it gives us the meetings that we're going to have for the budget development process. So once we have that calendar in place, we start developing our enrollment and staffing projections. And those are, since our cost of staffing is about 80% of the district's budget, that's a very critical number for us, what our enrollment is looking like and what our staffing is looking like. And then we develop the budget allocations for the sites and the departments. We also develop the revenue and expenditure assumptions that we want to use. And then we start meeting with our department directors in developing their budget. So in the past, we have given the directors their allocation for the year by simply looking at their existing budget and asking if that's going to be enough. And if it is, then it's rolled forward. But the process that we're establishing now is that you start with 0. You really don't have an allocation, and you start building your allocation based on need. We compare that need to the previous year and determine if they're going to need the same amount of resources, less resources, or more resources based depending on the needs of the district. So that process starts at the beginning of January as well, as soon as we have information from the governor. Second interim, as this district knows, as our district knows, second interim is a crucial report. Now we have 7 months of history of what our revenue looks like and our expenditure looks like. And the County Office of Education looks at second interims to really evaluate the solvency of the district. And we'll look at it from the perspective of, now that you have 7 months, we still have 5 more months to go. Will you be able to afford all of your financial obligations and still maintain the necessary reserves to be solvent? We look at the district finances thoroughly during that period of time, and we make sure that all the necessary adjustments are made so that when we present the second interim to the county office, we have done everything we need to be solvent. We don't want to submit a second interim to the county office, then turns around and gives us a letter of conditional approval of our second interim report. We want to do all our homework. We want to do everything that needs to be done so that when we submit that second interim report, we know that the letter that we're going to get from the county is an approval of our second interim report. Next slide. So then in May, the governor releases the May revise. The May revise is really an update of the governor's January budget. The district uses the May revise information to ensure that our assumptions that we're using to develop the budget model and that are going to be presented to the board and the community has the most up-to-date information. Next slide. So I was sharing with Superintendent Kamick that we would like, and I believe that, I'm not sure if the district does have board study sessions, but it's an opportunity for us to bring the list of all of the assumptions to the board and collect from the board their feedback as to if our assumptions are, if they're comfortable with the assumptions that we're using, if they're not comfortable, are they too conservative, not conservative enough? So this is an opportunity before a document is printed for the community to see and for the board to consider, that we have these conversations about all the assumptions that we're using for enrollment, the assumptions that we're using for revenue, the assumptions we're using for LCAP, the assumptions we're using for salaries and increases in STIRS and PERS. It gives us an opportunity to share all this information with the board, the community, and get feedback from the board and utilize that feedback to actually develop the budget that then it's available for public viewing of the community, for the community, and for which then we have it ready for our public hearing of our budget. So I'm sorry that I'm not fully aware of, okay, we do have a question from one of our board members. Ms. Campbell?
Thank you for that, Nancy. We have not historically had a study session as it relates to budget assumptions. We have had study sessions as it relates to other things. So I think the board would be open to having a study session as it relates to assumptions, given where we are right now. So I see Trustee Jones is shaking her head the same way I am.
Great.
And so we would definitely
Wonderful.
be open to receiving that information.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful news. It's because more than anything for the district to be working on a budget, there's a lot of work and effort that goes into it. And we really want to bring the board and the community along through that process. So when the board is asked to approve a budget, it's been fully vetted. And my goal really is to provide as much information as needed so that our board as a whole feels comfortable with the budget that we are approving. And so thank you for that, Trustee Campbell and Trustee Jones, because I think it's an important piece to introduce and to share all that information. So the feedback is welcome. Then we go back and we incorporate all that feedback. And what we bring to the next slide, please, Patty, what we bring to the board and the community as a public, for the public hearing. I think it's in slide 17, Patty, Ms. Sandoval. So what we bring to the board as a public hearing already incorporates the assumptions that we've made together. And then there's another opportunity through the public hearing process for the board to still give more information, to give more feedback, and the community to give more feedback. So by the time we bring the budget for adoption after the public hearing, then we should have no questions about what we're sending, what we're approving from for the budget for the district. And let me see what other slides I have after that. So there's the budget approval process. By then we would have incorporated anything that came out of the out of the public hearing, and then we go from there. So I know that there's a lot of information that I just shared, and I'm hoping that this provides sort of a big picture process that we follow. And then as we work through all of these, the first interim, second interim, there's going to be a lot more detailed information that we will share with all of you so that you're comfortable with what we are bringing to the board and to the community. Any questions?
Thanks so much, Nancy. This will be a great chance for any of our task force members to ask questions about either the budget development process or more specifically, where we finish the year with unaudited actuals. If there aren't any questions, then we can kind of move on to the next topic on our agenda, which is budgeting priorities. But I want to make sure we give time for anybody to ask questions they might have about the budgeting process overall or unaudited actuals. Trying to give good proper wait time from my classroom days.
No. Change the subject. No questions. Just kidding.
Oh no, I remember how important my wait time is. Okay, I don't see any questions, so feel free if you have them later. You can certainly raise them. But what we are going to do is move to the next topic in our agenda, which is budgeting priorities for the 21-22 school year. And that is a really, really, really broad topic. And so when we talk about priorities within the budget, some of those are in essence established for us. So the most significant portion of our budget goes to personnel. And that's because we're a people business. We serve students. But within that, one of the things we talked about as a task force last year is how do we help set forward the direction and the priorities for building our budget for the upcoming year? And one of the areas that I think we do, where we can do that, is by starting to set out some criteria. And we don't have to finish the discussion today, but at least start surfacing the areas today. And the way I would want to do that is to open the forum for our task force members to say, what are the key priorities for you as we look at the budget for this year? Where are the areas that you want to see us focusing our energy and our efforts? And from there, we can start to identify some themes that present themselves, some commonalities, and then start turning them into more tangible action steps. So for now, I'd like to kind of open it for input from the task force and less from myself as the facilitator or from Associate Superintendent Pfeiffer, and hear from all of you. What are the priorities you would like to see us targeting in our budget development? And feel free to reach out or raise your hand. I see Trustee Jones has her hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, CJ. I think you said for this year and for the 21-22 school year, but are we really talking about setting budget priorities for next year, or are we still talking about this fiscal year?
Well, our budget is, conceptually, our budget is set for this year, but we know that that is obviously going to be a continual, it's a changing document. It's always live, right? So we'll get our first snapshot at the first interim, and especially with the amount of one-time funding that we have and we see, including our ELOG dollars, our ESSER dollars, some of those things are priorities that pending board action could change. And as we start to identify the priorities, I think we can look at this year and next year, and then start to determine what priorities do we see developing as common themes, what action steps do we see start to surface, and then what parts of that are really subject to tangible change or reprioritization if that were the direction of the board. You're correct that the budget for this year has been board approved and board adopted. So in a large context, that is set. But we know that as we move through the year, we'll continue to have things that come up as items of need. Examples would be we have textbook adoptions that are here before us, and so we'll have to prioritize some of those things. So I would say it's good to keep the conversation open for both years. And the number of hands that just went up for input have overwhelmed the system. So we'll give it another minute. Trustee Campbell.
Superintendent Kamek, I would like us to really make sure we keep our eyes on that one-time money, because we know that whatever programs or systems that we put into place this year, it may not be a year-over-year reality. And so I just want us to make sure that when we're budgeting, I know last meeting we talked about the budget, the money's not going away at the end of this fiscal year, but I think it's the following year. Is that correct? So we only have like one more year of this additional funding. And so we definitely don't want to be thinking about programs that have a long lasting effect that we won't be able to fund. So I just really would like us to really prioritize the use of those one-time funds.
Yeah, I made note of that for keeping a focus on our one-time dollars for programs and personnel, and then looking at sustainability to make sure that we're not building anything that we can't sustain. Trustee Jones?
Yeah, I'm sorry for the background noise. So I want to make sure again that we're using the one-time funds appropriately, that we're keeping up with our plans for staff development that were part of the ELOG and ESSER fund plans. I know it's very difficult to talk about this in a time when we're seeing declining enrollment and the potential budget impacts, but we know from the teacher shortage and staff, all education staff really, that we're having a hard time hiring. And we have to figure out how to address that, because we want FUSD to be an attractive place to work, so that we, when we offer positions to people, they eagerly accept them, and that we're recruiting the best candidates, all across the district, not just teachers, but support staff and just all of those positions. And, I know that's big thinking given the budget challenges that we have, but I think we have to do that. I also want to make sure that, we talk about the challenges of declining enrollment, and there are certainly many, but what are the opportunities that we have with declining enrollment? Are there any? If we weren't losing funding because of declining enrollment, we would be, we were in increasing enrollment for so long that our sites are busting at the seams. And, in a perfect world, this declining enrollment situation would give us an opportunity to right-size our schools so they're not bursting at the seams. It would give us an opportunity to lower our class sizes, which I know is, that's not really possible when you're losing the funding that goes along with those students. But I want to see, I want to think big here. I don't want to be cautious. And maybe we think big and we realize, well, we can't do those things, but I don't want to assume that we can't out of the gate. I want to really look at what our opportunities may be as we go into declining enrollment while we acknowledge the challenges. And I think it's really important for all of us to take advantage of this time to continue to do advocacy. This is a time to be contacting our legislators about the challenges that we're facing. They're not unique to Fremont, and we're going to need help statewide and nationwide, really getting supporting public education. So we need to keep doing that. And I want to make sure that we're on top of any grant deadlines. I know with the last budget there were some opportunities to pursue grant dollars, but they may have deadlines attached to them. And I just want to make sure that we're not going to miss out on any opportunities. And I know it's hard to keep track of everything when it feels like we're just in crisis mode all the time. But, I want to make sure that I'm especially interested in, and I know I mentioned this at the board meeting, but as we're looking at at the expansion of TK and possibly full day kindergarten, we need to make sure we aren't losing out on applying for the facilities grants that could support the work that's needed to do that, because we know there are facilities changes that need to happen with those particular classes, because there are bathrooms and things that go into TK and K classrooms that aren't necessarily what happens in other grade levels. So there's a lot. It's like juggling, and you're trying to keep your eye on all the balls that are moving at once.
Thank you very much. So I made notation of all those things, and we'll certainly keep those in mind as we start to identify our themes. Saikat.
Thank you. So I think Trustee Jones already addressed some of the concerns that I also have in terms of it's a little bit of a shock to see the drop in enrollment in the district. And what I would like to see from a parent perspective, I have two kids who go to the FUSD schools, one in middle school, one in elementary. I would like to see the best programs available to them, be it teachers development and other non-educational programs also being maintained for them, so that they get a 360-degree education from the school district. And if it requires some hard decisions around consolidating schools because of the declining enrollment, then that needs to be looked at overall as well. Because, and as just Trustee Jones just said, reducing the class size would definitely help if the number of students are also lesser. So those are, I think, some of the key priorities that we have to address in this budget session. And I'm happy to help any way I can. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the input and the suggestions, and most certainly thank you for your willingness to help. I think there was to your point, I think there was a lot of surprise across many districts. We anticipated we'd see an increase in the decline, or a more rapid increase in the decline based on COVID-19. And the first thing I did when we saw our numbers is reach out to those other districts in our area, who, and some of them are also in declining enrollment, and kind of measure out where we did against their projections. And I'm holding out hope that those numbers actually go back up a little bit as we really start to emerge from the pandemic. The question is, when will that be? I think it's a lot more prolonged than anybody anticipated in the very beginning, but we will certainly see. Any other input from the group? Discussion points, priorities? As you're continuing to reflect and think, so far we've had some ideas to focus on our one-time dollars. It's a part of the COVID response. We have suggestions to look at the labor shortage across the district and the recruitment and retention, and that's for certificated management, classified employees across the board. It's something that I just recently had a conversation with classified employees about as well. So I think it goes across the whole organization. Looking for, despite the fiscal challenges that we see with declining enrollment, looking at what other opportunities there may be to enhance the district. Every change provides an opportunity. And also keeping our eye at the state level on grant dollars, and looking at keeping, if I'm paraphrasing correctly, keeping a rich and diverse program offering, despite what may be some reductions, so that we are educating the whole child and giving them a broad experience. Am I missing anything from our summary, or any other ideas that people would like to add in terms of important priorities in our budgeting process or our financial position as a district as a whole?
Superintendent, I was thinking, one school district, local school district, what they did may not have been the nicest thing to do, but it was very clever to increase their enrollment when they went to decline in enrollment, was to try to, take students from Fremont. It was the language program, the Mandarin immersion program and the dual immersion program for Spanish. They beefed that offering up. I even got a notice in my mailbox to enroll my child in the Spanish immersion program and the Mandarin immersion program. So there was definitely some opportunity there for us to expand and get more students into the district. If we could think in that entrepreneurial spirit, right? We could come up with some really great suggestions on program offerings.
Okay, so offering enhanced programs to help with recruitment and retention of students. And Brandon.
Hi, everyone. Well, that about 10 years ago, we wanted to have an international language magnet school is what we wanted to do. It never got off the ground. I think Trustee Campbell may have been talking about something like that, but now might be the right time to do something like that. I think we have a lot of good priorities on there. And if we've learned anything from the pandemic, it's about streamlining and making things better. But anything that could enhance programs and make people's jobs, whether they're certificated or classified, jobs or workload a little bit easier, would be positive. I don't know if there's a budget solution for that per se, but whether that's programs or like computer programs or anything like that. But if we're looking into streamlining, it's really about working smarter, not harder, so that we can spend our time focused on whatever the main goal of our job duties are, whether it's educating students or serving them in whatever our either other classified duties are, or certificated duties are, or managerial duties. If we could think it in that perspective. I'm not sure if we have ever taken that type of approach, which would be a totally something out of the box. So that would be an interesting session to have, I think. I don't know if I have the answers on that one either, but I thought I would throw it out there.
So consideration for an international language magnet school or something similar. And then in terms of recruitment and retention, you're describing a possible methods for reducing the workload for employees. And maybe that's done through streamlining, through making things more efficient, effective practices, somehow trying to lessen the day-to-day burden that our employees are shouldering.
Yes.
Okay. We'll go with Ann and then Trustee Jones.
Sorry, Diane, but I do want to echo some of Trustee Jones' comments from earlier. It's hitting all of us, from the board, management, classified, both SEIU, CSEA, teaching staff. Lots of our work has changed. And as we're looking at a different lens to right size our schools, do all the other things that have been mentioned, customer service may be an avenue that we need to use. Those of us at the sites are really feeling it from the customer service avenue, whether it be customer service to our #1 clients, which are our students' parents, our fellow employees. It's very difficult to hear that temporary employees are being hired at a very high rate, and employees that have been in the district for a while or substitute employees have a much lower hourly rate. So if we're looking at everything from a customer service standpoint, are we serving our students the best by hiring some people at a high rate that don't have a direct classroom impact? Are we serving our parents the best by not having enough staff to pick up every phone call, help out parents who don't understand the Alameda County Public Health chart and why their kid has to be isolated? Because that takes a lot of time. Why maybe there wasn't a sub, sorry, Matt, but why there wasn't a custodial sub, and why the floor didn't get fully vacuumed in the classroom. If a lens could be customer service as we're looking at our budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. So looking at our priorities, and one of them being, as I'm hearing you describe that, making sure that across the organization, for our students, for our staff, and for our community, they were able to maintain a high level of customer service. Okay. Trustee Jones?
Yes, this is going backwards a little bit, but to the slide that mentioned the expiration of the parcel tax, I don't know how quickly the board would need to have a discussion about this, but the next election is 2022. After that, it's 2024. If we're going to do anything in 2022, we have to start acting quick. And I'm not suggesting that we should, because I think there are a lot of things that may play into whether or not that would be successful this soon after the last effort. But just keeping in mind that there's a lot of lead time for a parcel tax. There's a lot of, hiring of the consultant that does the surveying of the community to see what they would support. And there's a lot of building momentum for that, the last time I think we had just about a year and it wasn't enough. It clearly was not enough. And we're approaching that year deadline. So I feel like we're quickly putting ourselves in a position to where 2022 isn't an option. And that may be the right call anyway, given the sentiments in the community and what's going on, that it wouldn't be successful in 2022. But I think we need to have that discussion fairly soon, because if we're not doing 2022, we need to make that decision soon. And if we are, then man, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. So I think maybe soon making a decision about a parcel tax in 2022.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Jones. So I'm adding that to our list in terms of parcel tax expiration, and then what are the next steps, both from a board level and then depending on the decisions around that, the timing at the community level.
Superintendent, that goes back to the conversation we were having at a board level too about the updating the master plan, the facilities master plan. If we need to do parcel tax or bonds or anything, especially if we do a bond, we need to be looking at that facilities master plan to get that thing updated in terms of, you know, getting revenue for infrastructure and facilities.
That is correct, Trustee Campbell. If we were going to go out for any additional bond measures within the community, a updated facilities master plan is always going to be a critical document, because that allows a district to look at the identified needs and start to prioritize what they believe would need to be accomplished. And then as part of the polling for that and part of the community discussion, considering where the community's interests lie in that regard and trying to craft the ballot language and the bond language appropriately. So that's definitely something that I'll add to our list here. And we've got about 10 minutes left in our meeting. I'm happy to take any more priorities as we close out, but as part of our norms, one of the things that we do is look forward to the future agenda items and discussion items. And so if we look back at our agenda, there's a couple things we want to go over. One, real quickly, is it's a longer conversation. So I'll give you the very short Reader's Digest summary. And that is many of our committees fall under the Brown Act. This committee does not. But for those committees in Fremont Unified that do, there's been some changes in law that allow them to continue to meet remotely. We don't fall under that same jurisdiction, but I believe prior to the pandemic, this committee has generally met in person. And so I wanted to open it up for a discussion to see for this group, and this is a conversation that many of our committees will be having. The reason they'll be having it is because under the new legislation, committees can continue to meet remotely after October 1st, provided they reaffirm every 30 days that they need to continue meeting remotely. Now, we don't have that same criteria because we're a task force, but I wanted to put it out for the group. Is there any input from this group about a desire to meet in person versus continuing to have our meetings online? And I'd be happy to open the floor for that if there's any input, or you're welcome to put any of your comments in the chat if you think that would be faster as well, but I'm happy to accept either input. It looks based on the eye contact, it looks like people are going to the chat.
I would chime in and say I would like to continue to do virtual.
Okay.
Superintendent, I am seeing in the chat that, and let's see, I believe, it's saying that 3:30 start time is still during some of the individuals' workday. A lot of support for virtual.
Would the preference be to start at not during the workday with that comment, or is the preference to keep the same time? Oh.
I think there's still some comments coming in. So it sounds like, Patty, from the input I think that you're seeing and then what we're seeing is people are in favor of virtual, and there's some consideration for bumping the start time back a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, I think honestly, some of our high schools have already switched to the later start time, which means they're ending later. So like prior school years, most high schools were ending at 3, and now some of them are 3:30. So I can imagine it's more difficult to make 3:30 just because some of our schools are just barely getting out by then. So even like a 15 or 30-minute change in the start time of this might be really helpful.
Okay. So looking at a later start time, continuing virtual, the proposed meeting dates we have, the next one would be October 18th. And then you can see the other meeting dates there. The reason I focus on October 18th is to inquire with the group, are there any specific items that they would like to see on the future agenda? And Associate Superintendent Pfeiffer, perhaps if you could remind us where we might be within the first interim presentation and preparation around October 18th.
I wish I could say we would be pretty well into having all the collected information, but the deadline for the first interim so that we can capture those months is really October 31st.
Right.
So prior
that's
to
what I
October
thought.
31st, it's too early in the process us to try to provide that information.
Okay, and that's what I thought. I wanted to confirm with you. I believe that it goes right up through October 31st. So that's helpful information to know. So in looking at those future dates, the next meeting is still October 18th. If the first interim discussion is not one that we'll be having on October 18th, but more likely November, are there other topics that this group would like to see around budget development, budget priorities, any fiscal matter within Fremont Unified School District that this group would like to engage in a discussion about or learn more about?
If I may suggest, Superintendent Kamick, we will have enrollment numbers by October 18th. CBETS will be completed. Not sure how much more we'll have as far as multi-year projections for enrollment, but at least we can certainly talk about what the actual numbers look like. We could potentially do some in-house calculations and use our roll down method where the kinders become first graders, first grade becomes second grade, and see if that gives us a number, or maybe we will have some numbers from our demographer. But I think the topic of enrollment is something we can look at for that meeting.
Okay, so I'm hearing enrollment as a topic. I agree with you, Associate Superintendent. That would be an important topic, and we'll actually be looking at some enrollment numbers in our October board meeting on the in the first board meeting on October, because we're going to take a snapshot of the month of September. You may have seen, if any of you are following media and education today, there was a few articles about the percentage drop of day-to-day attendance based on quarantines of students and issues related to that. And so we're going to be taking a look in Fremont Unified through our first full month of September and identifying how does this September match up to a pre-pandemic September, and how many absences are we seeing increased related to quarantining, COVID-19, whatever it might be. So that's certainly a topic we could take a look at. Are there other areas that people would like to see us explore and discuss in terms of the budget for our next meeting on the 18th? Trustee Campbell.
If we're talking enrollment, can we talk staffing?
Yes, we can. We can bring forward a conversation on both of those items because they're most certainly connected.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that'll take up a pretty good amount of time. Those sound like simple topics, but they're pretty complex. I want to close out our meeting by following up with some of the suggestions. So one of the questions was, could we meet at 4 o'clock and change that start time? Is there any opposition? I'll start with that phrase. Is there any opposition to the group from starting at 4 o'clock? You can just give a vigorous shake of the head. Okay, so it sounds like we have consensus to start at 4, and we've got some topics for our next meeting, and we will leave the norms and focus areas as they are. And if anything comes up between now and then, please feel free to reach out to myself or Patty, and we will continue those items that you may have concerns about if they are, and we'll bring them forward to the next agenda. I appreciate everybody being here today. I know you have many competing priorities. and I appreciate your willingness to be part of this conversation. So thank you very much. And to our audience that may be watching or watching on a future recording, thank you for your commitment to our students as well. Take care, everyone.